The most painful moments in Tennessee basketball history in March.
Come on, guys, it's game time.
4 downs. Can you count? 4 downs. 1, 2, 3, 4. The Dave Hooker Show with Caleb Calhoun. Represented by T. Scott Jones. BanksandJones.com. Tennessee's trial attorney. From the Ted Russell Ford Lincoln Studio, East Tennessee's #1 volume and customer service dealer, Ted Russell Ford and TedRussellLincoln.net. Now to the Dave Hooker Show on Off the Hook Sports.
Dylan points out that losing in the Sweet 16 to Kentucky would be heartbreaking. Again, it would. Before we get to Cooper Mays, who will introduce 4 downs for us, Caleb, let me ask you this. Do you think the history of Tennessee basketball places any more pressure on these players because Tennessee has never made it to the Final Four?
I don't think the history of Tennessee basketball does, actually. I think the history of Rick Barnes does more for them. I think they want to do it for Barnes more than the Tennessee basketball program. Now, that may not be what some people want to hear, but I think Zakai Ziegler is a guy. Let's be honest, Dave. Zakai Ziegler wants to do this for Rick Barnes. He loves Tennessee fans. They have helped him out a lot when he had his house burned and things like that. But like Ziegler, Meshack, and those guys, they want this for Barnes. They love that guy.
I completely agree. Now, let me ask you this, and it makes no sense, but is there a part of you that expects, before we get to those losses, is there a part of you that expects Tennessee to fall short because they're Tennessee and it's basketball?
Yes. And there's a part of me that expects them to fall short because they're Rick Barnes, Tennessee and Rick Barnes. Okay. So like, it's like not a good combination of underachieving in the NCAA tournament, is it?
Now, I'm with you. I mean, it makes no sense. It's just a jersey. It's just a school. It doesn't make any sense, but there's just a part of me that's just like, oh man, it's Tennessee and it's March. It's not going to work out well. But let's get into 4 downs, the most painful losses, most forgettable losses in Tennessee basketball history. Coop, tell us what to do.
Cooper Mays here. Hit like and subscribe.
All right. 4 downs is now what down, Coop?
Coop here. First down.
All right. This one's pretty painful. The 2000 loss to North Carolina. To me, this is the all-time most painful one. I think it was the most talented team that Tennessee's ever fielded. They made it to the Sweet 16. They would have faced Tulsa in the next game and likely advanced to the Final Four. It was all set up for them. Now, as it turns out, I think Tulsa actually advanced to the Final Four that year. They won the next game. So it's not a gimme by any stretch of the imagination. But it seemed to be all laid out there for Tennessee. Now, we'll talk about the Ohio State loss. But I guess since I was at the North Carolina loss and I saw that and the pain that those players went through and the fact that it was fluky, North Carolina was not going to play Julius Peppers until Brendan Hayward got in foul trouble. And so they put Peppers in there, and he was a matchup nightmare. To me, because of the circumstances around it, this to me is by far the most painful. We don't necessarily have to rank them, but what do you remember about that game, Caleb?
So I actually, funny enough, don't remember. That was the first year I ever did a bracket. And believe it or not, I had Tennessee upsetting Stanford in the Sweet 16. So I had them as an Elite 8 team. And then when I saw North Carolina upset Stanford, I'm like, well, I got the Stanford-North Carolina game wrong, but I'm golden for my Tennessee Elite 8 upset pick. And for those who don't know, for our younger viewers, that's not the North Carolina you think of. That was an 8 seed North. That was like this year's North Carolina team more than anything. They were in between Dean Smith and Roy Williams, and they were just kind of out. They were like Tennessee's football program between Philip Fulmer and Josh Heupel during this time. And Tennessee had a 9-point lead. They choked it away. By the way, Dave, no, North Carolina actually beat Tulsa the next week. They went to the Final Four. And
I'm sorry.
No, it's okay, because here's what's crazy. Tennessee beats Tulsa. They'd have played Florida. Tennessee beat Florida. They swept Florida that year. So they might have gone to the national title game. Now, they probably are not beating Michigan State in the national title game, but they're getting there. And truth be told, yeah, that was a...
Boy, but wouldn't you... A Tom Izzo team is kind of like a Rick Barnes team. I would have enjoyed watching Tennessee's athleticism against a Michigan State team. I agree they're probably not going to lose, but because of the athleticism, you have a shooter's chance.
You do have it. That's a good point. You do have a shooter's chance, but you
Or
don't
a
have
puncher's chance if you want to use a boxing
we-
analogy.
You just talk about Julius Peppers. Tom Izzo, whatever else you want to say about him, because he's only got one national title. I think that's kind of overrated. He's always in there, and actually winning it's kind of more based on luck. Tom Izzo has the most skilled big men in the tournament every single year. And does anybody believe that Jerry Green could have coached dealing with skilled big men if he couldn't figure out how to adjust to Julius Peppers on the court?
No, it wasn't going to work out. First down brought to you by Newbert Collision Center for nearly 50 years. Newbert Collision Center has been East Tennessee's best choice for quality repair work and fantastic customer service. JoeNewbertCollision.com. The link is down below, JoeNewbertCollision.com.
Cooper Mays here. Second down.
Second down is the 2007 loss to Ohio State. I have to be honest. I was in a very good situation, let's just say, with some friends. I wasn't covering Tennessee basketball at the time. I was working for the News Sentinel. So I wasn't around to see the heartbreak, and I watched the game with my friends, but it was a very good night. So it offset that Ohio State loss. If you want to argue that the Ohio State loss is more painful than the North Carolina loss, you certainly have a pulpit to stand upon, Caleb.
You know what's so similar about these two losses? Before I get to what hurts about the Ohio State loss most, you want to know what's really similar?
That Tennessee had the lead.
That Tennessee had the lead, and that the losses actually didn't hurt as much in the moment. They hurt more retroactively. Now, let me explain. 2000, when they lost to North Carolina, Dave, you knew they lost to North Carolina, but you looked at the roster and you said, this team has everybody back next year. They're going to be dominant again. And then they got as high as number 4. The only reason that loss hurts more is because the next year's team flamed out and then lost to Charlotte in the NCAA tournament. That's not what the next year's team after this one did. Okay, Bruce Pearl would never let that happen. But this team lost to Ohio State. They blew a 20-point lead. It was painful. It was sickening. Had they won that game, they would have gone to play Memphis in the next round. They had beaten Memphis by 20 earlier in the year. But the reason that loss didn't hurt is Dane Bradshaw was the only player that team was losing. Not only were they losing Dane Bradshaw, Dave, they were getting J.P. Prince and Tyler Smith the next year. So you thought, wow, like, okay, they were getting J.P. Prince, Tyler Smith, and Cameron Tatum. So you're thinking, oh, man, Sweet 16, 1-point loss, 20-point lead, tough, but got everybody back except one guy, and we add Tyler Smith and Dane and J.P. Prince. Team's going to be even more loaded. That's kind of what they thought. The only reason that loss stings now is because the next year's loss to Louisville represented the end of an era. That's what hurts the most.
Yes. Pseudo Sham says, I hate to say it, but I bet against Tennessee a lot in the tournament just to have a big paycheck to help relieve the pain of loss. What the H? Come on. You can't do that. That's just wrong.
No, please. I bet against my teams all the time.
What? You're terrible. Just don't bet on your team. Just don't even bet either way.
Nope.
Tennessee center Cooper Mays here. Third down.
Third down is this, and that is the 2019 loss to Purdue. That one's pretty fresh.
This is the most heartbreaking one for me. You talk about 2000 and 2007, but again, both those teams had everybody coming back the next year. You knew this was the end of the Grant Williams era, this game, because Grant Williams and Admiral Schofield were seniors. They were going to be gone. Jordan Bone was going to be gone. As a matter of fact, four of the 5 starters were going to be gone. So you knew this was the end of an era. This was a team that was number 1 for a good part of the year. And there was a terrible call that cost them that game. There was a foul called on a 3-point shot late. Purdue hit 2 or 3 free throws to go to overtime and win. And I think there was a foul out on Tennessee. I think was it Schofield who fouled out? I think so. But this one was the most painful for me because this team would have gone to the Elite 8. They would have played Virginia in the next round, Dave, and I think they could have beaten Virginia. And this one, it wasn't just a loss. It was the end of an era. And I think that's what hurt the most, was seeing how that played out.
I'm going to let Amy lead us into our next one.
All SEC center Cooper Mays here. Fourth down.
My most painful loss memory was the second time Ralph Sampson beat us in the tournament. It was the first time I remember crying after a loss. Wow, that one's pretty brutal. I want to get to last year's Purdue game as well, too. But I have to be honest, Amy, you might have a year or two on me. I didn't realize that they lost to Ralph Sampson twice. That's a bad darn draw.
That's a rough draw. That was the Dale Ellis years. They lost to Ralph
Yeah.
Sampson twice, but they were not the reason that they weren't supposed to win those games. I'm not sure they were in either one of those games either. Amy, you can correct me on that. But I've done a lot of research in the past, so I've missed on that one on just how close Tennessee was in their losses in these NCAA tournaments. But I believe you if one of them was close. I'm not saying.
Thank you, Steve. Says betting against UT is like burning your own house down. All right, so make that a poll question. Is it okay to bet against your own team?
Betting against UT will build you a new house. If you know what I'm talking about,
Yeah.
You can make a lot of money.
By the way, Pseudo Sham says, I'm not a fair weather fan, by the way. I listen to every game of the Wade Houston's final year on the radio. Well, then you are a true fan because they won 5 games that year. So make that a poll question. Is it okay to bet against your own team? So, Caleb, we're on 4th down now. We have not yet mentioned the freshest wound that Tennessee basketball suffered, and that was last year when they went against Zach Edey. And, boy, I tell you what, it took me about 5 minutes to figure out that he was a major, major matchup problem for Tennessee.
Yes, but he was a bigger matchup problem than he needed to be. Jonas Aidoo, I keep saying, could have lost that battle. Fine. He didn't have to get absolutely destroyed and embarrassed in that battle, and that's what he did. And that was one of the most pathetic displays. Zach Edey did to Jonas Aidoo, a quick history lesson, guys, because I'm a Grizzly fan, what Zach Randolph did to Blake Griffin in the NBA playoffs one year, where Blake Griffin was the high-flying athlete and all of this, and Zach Randolph just gets physical with him and punked him down low. And then Blake Griffin wanted no part of it. Blake Griffin faked an injury to miss a game. And then in game 6, when the Grizzlies eliminated him, Zach Randolph looks back at Blake Griffin on national TV and calls him a female genitalia in front of everybody. And the Grizzly fans just cheer him as he gets thrown out of the game. So that's what Zach Edey did to Jonas Aidoo. That is straight up what Zach Edey did to Jonas Aidoo, and it was pathetic to watch. That one, though, Dave, it was painful to a degree, but you did feel like Purdue was the better team, even though Tennessee could have won that game if Jonas Aidoo didn't get punked. I got a few more, though. Now, I want to just throw a few by you, and you tell me.
Well, hold on. I want to ask you this. Would Okpara do better against Edey?
Yes.
I don't know that anybody would do better than what Jonas Aidoo did. He was clearly not up for the challenge.
That was air. Zach Edey was playing air in that game. I'm sorry. Dave, am I being too hard on a college kid? I'm being very disrespectful to him. That's one of the most pathetic things I've ever seen from a player.
I don't think you're being too hard on him. I think that had he given 100% effort and had he not let Edey get in his head, I still think Edey would have dominated him. It wouldn't have been as ugly, but I think that was going to turn out Edey wins that battle. Just how much does he win it by? Which I think you've got to tell Aidoo, just win 1 in 3 battles. Don't worry about half of them. Don't worry about 3/4 of the battles. Just try to win 1 in 3. Keep him for whatever he had, 28. Make him have 20. Just do something.
And Aidoo had 0 points. Maybe you score 4. If you score 4 and Edey scores 20, that's enough for Dalton Connect to win the game. This reminds me of Isaiah Thomas said this one time, Dave. I don't know if you know this, but the Jordan rules. You want to know what he actually said in an interview?
What's that?
He said, maybe it wasn't Isaiah. Maybe it was one of the Pistons. They said the Jordan rules weren't for Michael Jordan. They were for Scottie Pippen. We knew if we took Michael Jordan out of the game and Scottie Pippen had to step up, he was not mentally tough enough to handle that. And if you watch that, Scottie Pippen a lot of times took himself out of the game in those 2 series. And
Scottie Pippen was not very mentally tough.
And then he got a migraine one of the series where they lost. So that's what happened in that one.
Scottie Pippen would have been a complete washout had he not been on the same team as Michael Jordan.
I know.
Michael Jordan absolutely took receipts and made him accountable.
He did. I mean, it's funny that Scottie hates Michael so much because, Scottie says people don't appreciate his greatness, but it's like you got to your greatness because Michael worked with you every day and demanded that you get there because Michael knew he needed you.
Yeah.
So,
and then Michael Jordan's son slept with what? Scottie Pippen's ex-wife?
Yep. Now we got to go through a few other losses. The Sister Jean Loyola Chicago one is a rough one. Tennessee was a 3 seed. Loyola Chicago was an 11 seed. They hit a game winner and then they go to the Final Four. Tennessee's going to the Final Four if they win that game. That's 2018. I want to throw a couple at you, Dave, and then I'm going to go back in history real quick, see what you think.
Oh, I gotta share Derek's comments. He's absolutely right. Old school basketball, someone would have come off the bench as a villain to slow Edie. You're absolutely right.
Yeah, they'd have knocked him out. They'd have
Yeah.
knocked him to the ground. Like
Yeah.
you may score on me, but you ain't gonna fight me. It's like, I agree. It's like, so 2008 Louisville, even though Tennessee got blown out, Dave, I felt was very painful because that Chris Lofton era was such a beloved team, and that for it to end like that was tough to watch, honestly.
Agreed. And that was the season where Chris was sick, right?
Yeah, but we didn't know it in that moment.
Right. So the entire season was kind of like, what's going on? Something's a little different.
I think even as he was sick, they got to #1 that year. They had their best season ever to that point. Let me ask you this, though. We talked about the North Carolina game. Was the Charlotte game the next year painful because it was the end of an era, or were Tennessee fans like, good riddance, get out of here, all of you guys?
I think the players were like, good riddance. Let's get ourselves out of here.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I mean, I think Tony Harris was done. I mean, and I think that, he gets criticized, and I've poked fun at him on this show for the terrible shot he took that somehow hit the bottom of the backboard, which is difficult to do from 3-point range. But if you look at the other 4 players, nobody's moving. I mean, they just hung Tony out to dry. So, I mean, that is painful and an indictment of coaching and all of that. But I think a lot of those players were ready to move on. And quite frankly, I think some of them thought to themselves, winning this game means another week that I'm in this program that's toxic. Let's just get the heck out of here.
Wow. You're telling a similar story to what people said about Tennessee football with Tyler Bray in 2011, where people think Tyler Bray and Derrick Rogers threw that game to Kentucky.
I'd never thought about that, but I think that's a good comparison. Portions of the program brought to you by Quality Tire Pros, serving Chattanooga's community since 1957. All major brands of tires, full service automotive, brakes, alignments, oil changes, and more. QualityTirePros.com. Tell Bo that Dave Hooker and Off the Hook Sports said hello. And also, RickTerryJewelry.com. Rick Terry wants to be your jeweler, looking for affordable game day jewelry, a Tennessee tradition. RickTerryJewelry.com. With Caleb Calhoun, I'm Dave.
Hold on.
Yes, sir.
I'd be remiss if I didn't do history real quick and didn't mention a couple of ones, because 1977, Tennessee was upset by Syracuse in overtime. That was Ray Mears' last game. That was the last game of the Bernie and Ernie show. That team won the SEC tournament, or the SEC regular season title. That team should have gone on to win a national title that year, and they lost in the first round to Syracuse. 76, they lost to VMI, another lesser team. And then in 1967, they lost to Dayton by 1. All 3 Tennessee teams were better than those teams. That was a different time where not always the best team made the NCAA tournament, but Ray Mears had a very, very bad NCAA tournament track record. Never.
He did. He did have a bad tournament track record. He was an interesting cat. He claims that he came up with Big Orange Country. I don't know if he did or didn't, but it certainly removed him from the conversation of all-time favorite legends, because they got in a whole lawsuit battle over that. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that, but
I actually learned that from you.
Yeah, he felt like he owned that, and I don't know if he had it trademarked or not, but whatever the case, Ray Mears deserves an awful lot of credit for making Tennessee basketball relevant. And I would say that he actually did more than guys that have built it to this point, which would be Kevin O'Neal, Jerry Green, because he actually had to put together a show and make it exciting. And if I'm a coach, there's nothing worse than saying you have to win with this style, whatever the style is. But he had to win with a fun style. He had to have a fun program, or nobody was showing up to Stokely. Nobody.
Yeah, and it was
a football program. Go ahead.
Yeah, and there's a 30 for 30 on the culture shock for Bernard King coming from Brooklyn, like black guy from Brooklyn coming to the South at a school that had just integrated 10 years before. And I mean, and he's there to make a program relevant that no one has ever cared about before. And I mean, it was a lot of interesting stuff on there.